All right, we did it. All right, so it looks like we have two players. We have Zalay up the top playing the Tempo Mage up against Zaishio. I don't know if that's how that's supposed to be pronounced, but that's what we'll go with. They look pretty fierce in their facial expressions. So, Tempo Mage against mid-range Shaman, a lot of times the biggest thing you want to be doing is just putting out as much pressure as possible and trying to kill him. The mid-range Shaman has a lot of things. It's got some of the best tempo plays in the game, some of the best value plays in the game, but it has absolutely no healing. So oftentimes, if you can get a lot of chip damage in early, they can't recover from it, which is why Tempo Mage has sort of risen to popularity as sort of a counter to mid-range Shaman in some form of sense. It's not a direct hard counter, but it's a nice little soft counter. It's got some good matchups against it and some well-rounded matchups in the field otherwise. So with no on-curve plays here, just Arcane Intellect trying to assemble more options. Zaisho, on the other hand, he doesn't have to do anything. His opponent has absolutely nothing on the board, but uses the Maelstrom portal there. I'm kind of curious about that. I mean, he has the mana to do it. This sets up for a Harrison Jones next turn, or a Thing from Below next turn. And he's just pushing damage with the Spirit Claws. I'm not really sure what his list is, but this seems very aggressive, which doesn't have very good aggressive tools, so he might find himself in a situation where he wish he had double spell power Maelstrom Portal later on, because that's so strong when you can play like a Thalnos and double Maelstrom Portal, or roll spell power totem, then just double Maelstrom Portal aboard. To double Mana Worm or not to double Mana Worm? The thing is, you gotta get rid of the spell power, right? So, I kind of like playing all of the drops since you've already seen a Maelstrom Portal. Just trying to put out as much pressure as possible. You get both of the Mana Worms out there. You get the Babbling Book in play to sort of contest. The 2-1 plus the weapon still does trade up with one of your Mana Worms, but you do get to push a lot of pressure that way. But of course, I think starting with the Babbling Book to see what you get is best. Do you really want to Arcane Blast a Totem, though? That is pretty weak. We'll see. What does he get off the book? Frost Nova. So it looks like he's just going to be very passive with it. I personally am a more aggressive player and would take the more aggressive play here, but I can definitely support the patience here, charging up the Mana Worm, saving the Arcane Blast for a higher value target. The Spirit Claws charged up with the spell power doesn't really do anything. It allows Zaisho to potentially get another 3 damage on Zalay's face, but he doesn't care because he's at 27. So if Zaisho wants to continue punching him in the face with Spirit Claws, like, more power to him. Flame Tongue Totem's an interesting pickup here. On turn 5, he could already Flame Tongue Thing from Below if he wants to continue this aggressive line and just start jamming damage to the face. But I kind of like just playing Totem Thing from Below. Alright, he Flame Tongued and traded, and then Spirit Claws the face. He's really prioritizing that face damage with the Spirit Claws. I don't get it. Like, I mean, it's 1 mana deal 9, but you're not a deck that typically runs any burst. You're mid-range Shaman, so how are we finishing him off by just chipping him in the face with Spirit Claws a lot? I really don't understand the game plan and the logic behind this. You see, like, Spirit Claws could potentially trade for cards from Zalay instead of trading for life. And right now he is at a huge card deficit. By playing the Flame Tongue out there, I assume Zaisho's looking to try and bait out removal from Zalay so his Thing from Below can come down and cause a huge Tempos turn without being contested too strongly. And he is going to get his wish here. There's going to be some removal used, but Zalay's still going to have the Fireball in the pocket to remove the Thing from Below, and now he's got 2 supercharged Mana Worms. And of course you got to take out the spell power when doing this to protect them from the Spirit Claws. Oh, that is a huge top deck. That's absolutely insane. Just when you thought he was in a bad spot, the Fire Elemental is such a great Shaman card. Brings back a lot of power to the board. Yeah, do you want to Fireball that Fire Elemental? It's kind of sketchy. If you don't, though, your Faceless Summoner gets traded into pretty easily. If a Hex comes out, you're pretty sad on your Faceless Summoner too. Then the Fire Elemental gets a value trade, and you're out of cheap little removal spells to trade up with it. He's already used the Arcane Blast and the Frostbolt, so Zalay is kind of running out of options to be able to clean up after value trades. And that Healing Totem makes it so you have to clean up after value trades pretty much immediately, otherwise it starts getting healed out of range. So I wouldn't be too surprised to see a Fireball get launched this turn. Oh, he's going to take the risk and go with the Faceless Summoner. So if there's like a Hex value trade situation, he gets really blown out of the water, but he feels like if he Fireballs, it's too weak of a turn, and I have to agree with him there. Like, Fireball, so weak, he doesn't get to develop anything, and this way, if the gamble pays off, he gets to develop a 3-drop, which is, it's not huge, but it's nothing to scoff at. Man, imagine if he saved that other Maelstrom Portal instead of killing O2s with it. Just boom, boom, whole board dead, and then Spirit Claws trades into the 5/5. Would have been so sick. Would have been able to push 6 damage face. So a little bit punished for firing off the Maelstrom portal earlier. But still, incredible board position. It's going into Flame Strike turn, which is a little scary. But there's no Flame Strike, you win. And that's the gamble he's going with right now. That's the game plan. Spirit Claw is picked up for his delay, so the gamble of playing the Faceless Summoner did pay off for him because he can clean up the board here. Or, I mean, clean up the Fire Elemental now. Not in a super great way, but in a way. So, when your opponent has 1 card and you have 5, oftentimes you're looking to try and just stabilize so that way you can get to an even board state and your card advantage can win before you're totally depleted on life. So, it might just be time for a really slow turn from Zalae, where he Arcane Blasts and Fireballs, but since the Healing Totem's gone, it's not even crazy to go for something like Frost Nova Water Elemental, and then the following turn, he could go Firelands Portal on the 5/5 plus Arcane Blast on the 6/2. That would be super sick, and then he would be able to be developing both of the turns. Whereas if he goes with the Fireball line of play this turn, Fireball Arcane Blast, he doesn't develop this turn. So I think those are the two like really appealing lines, and since there was no Hex last turn, I really like Water Elemental Frost Nova. Oh, he sees it. No, he doesn't. All right, he's going with this line. He's got a different idea than me. He's okay taking 5, I guess. Yeah, I guess that's fair as well. If Bloodlust comes out or something like that, you've already have enough health anyway. You have 24. There's Bloodlust. 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 17, 20 damage. So that Spirit Claws that Xiaoshu was just jamming face with earlier, turns out, really good thing to do because he's gotten really close to lethal by doing that now. He's going to hold off on the Bloodlust 1 turn, though. Try and wait until it's lethal. Instead of cashing it in for 9. Which makes sense. As long as there's no Flame Strike, it's guaranteed to go up in damage. Second Firelands Portal drawn. Not a lot of help. 9, 10, 11, 12. Oh, man, it's going to be hard. Is this the time to Frost Nova now? Or just not going to respect Bloodlust? Sure. It's really hard to respect Bloodlust in this situation, but Leroy Jenkins, pulled out of the Firelands Portal, could actually be able to respect the Bloodlust. Now he can get the 2 trades in, take care of the Harrison Jones, and there's only 6, 9, 10, 11, 12 damage on the board from Xiaoshu. Mana Tide, not a lot of help. He's got the ability to Bloodlust and trade up to try and protect his Mana Tide, but you have to assume at this point that there is removal in your opponent's hand. You know there's no Flame Strike, so I like just going wide on the board. Ooh, with that Taunt Totem rolled too. He's just trying to set up for this Bloodlust lethal, and that's something Zalae has to be thinking about as he sees what card would Xiaoshu just be continuing to hold on to in this situation. If it was Lightning Bolt, he would be using it to remove the Water Elemental. It's very narrowed down, actually, at this point to being only a few things, and Bloodlust is one of those things, so that should be on his mind. Man, Mana Tide Taunt Totem is so sick. The Shaman's Totem rolls have been so dirty this game. Can he beat Bloodlust? Is there any line that plays around it while still putting you in a winning position? There's not really too many that play around it while putting you in a winning position, and that's pretty awkward. And this kind of plays around it. Your opponent only has 9 damage. 9's a scary number, though, especially when they have a Mana Tide, drawing them an additional card. Yeah, you just gotta trade play the Cult Sorcerer. That's not lethal. Do you set your opponent to 1? You can set your opponent to 1 while developing everything except for a totem. 1 health seems like a good spot to put your opponent. Are you afraid of dying? That's another scenario you gotta ask yourself. How much damage? If there's double Fireball in Zalae's hand, you're still... That would be 14, 15. You would be dead, exactly dead to double Fireball if you do not kill the 3-2. So I really like killing this 3-2 here. It's a good play. So that's why I think he's going there with killing the 3-2 instead of trying to push the damage instead of his own lethal. Flame Waker, Frost Nova. That's pretty cute. That could stall some time and also put a lot of damage on his opponent. Or threaten to, anyway, because he's going to have 8, 9, 10 on the board, 16 with the Fireball, and then 1 with the Ping. So if he goes Flame Waker, Frost Nova, Ping's face, then next turn... Zalae will have lethal if Xiaoshu doesn't top deck anything. And, you know, trade into the Feral Spirits, of course. What a sick card. Frost Nova is so dirty in Temple Mage. I'm surprised Temple Mage doesn't actually occasionally include Frost Nova. It's so good. Oh, he can even remove spell power to help his guys stay alive. He doesn't need the ping this turn. He can use the ping next turn to do the lethal. So, okay. He's getting 2 more pings in the immediate. He misses the ping of 0 power, though. Does land it on the correct target. But 8, 9, 10. This way he only has 11. Right? Yeah, he only has 11 damage now in the following turn. So I'm not so big of a fan of this play. The Lightning Bolt plus the Bloodlust could potentially be lethal. Yeah, Zalay's order there makes it so he doesn't have lethal this turn. If he would have ordered that last turn a little bit better, could have had lethal on this turn. And if Shaman would have Bloodlusted earlier, he would have had lethal this turn too. So it's been a really back and forth game. Both players afraid of getting lethaled by the other person, so they're not committing their burn. And I think there's been a few errors with those sort of plays. And wins the flip. Both players a little bit too passive, in my opinion. What do you think, other caster? No, I think it was great. I think it was, they needed to be defensive. It's all about that macro game plan, the defensive orient. No, you can't just over be defensive. At one point, you need to be able to see the lines, commit to the higher percent line, and take it. And that's something that they weren't unable to identify in that situation from either side. And I think if either player would have pulled the trigger just a little bit sooner, the guy that did it first would have won. Yeah, you may be right, man. Alright, so coming up next, we have the Malygos Druid, is what it appears like, up against the mid-range Shaman. Soleil up against Zausio. I believe it's best of 5, so I think this is the final game of the season. I mean, of the series. And we get Raven Idol turn 1. Sometimes you take Mulch. We didn't see any 4-mana 7/7s in the previous game, so I don't think Mulch is a good pick. I wouldn't mind Raven Idol or Starfall, but I definitely don't think you pick Mulch when your opponent didn't play any 4-mana 7/7s. Starfall's kind of questionable. It's so slow, right? So I would favor Raven Idol. I think both of those cards are below average for the value you can be expecting off Raven Idol. Alright. Zalay agrees, ends up also going with the Raven Idol. Lightning Storm drawn for the Shaman. Usually you want a coin totem here to avoid getting the potential Wrath. When your opponent Raven Idol's on turn 1, their percent chance of having Wrath also increases because you got about 11% chance to pick it up. So oftentimes you'll see players coin totem golem here to avoid just their 1-drop getting Wrathed on curve and then their 2-drop getting Feral Raged on curve. Just makes it so your curve is more awkward for the Druid player to deal with a lot of the time. But no, we're going to go with the Tunnel Trog. Opens him up to the potential Wrath. It's a risk he wants to take to push potentially 1 less damage. But he gets to save the coin, which is a valuable resource, especially with Thunderbluff Valiant in your hand. And now Fire Elemental. Being able to coin Thunderbluff Hero Power or being able to coin Fire Elemental could be huge for him later on, so this risk might pay off in a big way. Not too many great options here. It's either Raven Idol and look for a removal in the form of Feral Rage or Wrath, or just play a Fandral and hope it works out. The super scary thing of playing Fandral isn't Hex, because your opponent's overloaded. They could coin Hex, but that's just like a garbage play. The scary thing is the Flame Tank Totem, which allows them to remove your Fandral while keeping their minion on the board while also developing. So it's like too scary in my opinion to just drop a Fandral into this situation. And so that's why we see him here go with the Raven Idol. And I like Wild Growthing. You don't interact with the board any, but your other plays don't interact with the board any either because they don't remove anything. This way maybe you get Emperor down, maybe you can get a Fandral plus Nourish, and then an Arcane Giant somehow slips out in the mix there, and something happens. But you know, the Shaman player identifying that Zalay has had some very weak turns is just going full smork, and I like that a lot. I think that's what you have to do in that situation. Basically got to just drop Emperor into this. It's either drop Emperor or draw with Nourish and hope you're a god. So I'm a big fan of just dropping Emperor. He's got 7 mana next turn, and Fandral Nourish costs 7 mana, so it lines up really cute. Lightning Storm can be used to push more damage here, in conjunction with maybe the Coin and Thalanos, or you can just drop a Thunderbluff Valiant. I really like dropping the Thunderbluff Valiant. You maintain yourself not overloaded, you get that huge threat out there, and you're hoping that your opponent has a difficult time dealing with it. And a lot of times Druid does, as they've been cutting mulch lately in response to Shamans cutting 4-mana 7/7s. But Thunderbluff Valiant rushed out there is a target you're going to want to mulch. The Thunderbluff Valiant threatens to do 5 damage, and that's it. You know, if you don't count, I guess, the buff on the from the Flame Tongue. So if he hero powers, it's 7 damage. So I still like just going with Fandral Nourish. You got to initiate your own game plan, find your own outs, and that's what he hits there. He hits the Wrath. It's exactly what you're looking for with that 2 extra mana off. So now it comboed gets to get the draw as well as deal the damage. So it's going to be able to remove the Flame Tongue Totem, develop a 3/5, ramp up to 10 mana, and draw an additional 3 cards, which potentially Zalay can recover from this position thanks to Arcane Giant, but it's not going to be an easy task because that Thunderbluff Valiant's just generating value every single turn. The Lightning Storm is going to leave him overloaded though, so he has no developmental plays next turn besides Totem. So if the Thunderbluff Valiant does go down, it's going to be a weak turn for the mid-range Shaman player, which I don't really like. I think you could have ignored the Fandral there so that you could, I don't know, it's really tough, honestly. The mid-range Shaman took that play too fast for me to really analyze all the options. We're already on to the Druid's turn, and Zalay's got a really good ability to clean up with these Living Roots, and he can develop an Arcane Giant. Things are just lining up exactly the way he wants them to. So I really like just cleaning both of these up, plopping out an Arcane Giant, and assuming you're not dead. There's not a lot of burst that a mid-range Shaman can do with only a 3/1 on the table and only 4 mana. So I don't think there's any reason to Feral Rage. I think it's much better just to proactively develop and get ready to storm the board back. And this is not great for the Shaman. If he goes Thalnos Lightning Bolt face, he can set up for lethal, potentially. If he tries to fight for the board, he can top deck Hex, potentially. So these are kind of like the lines that are going through his mind. The outs. With double Feral Rage in the deck, you got to respect the potential heal from the Druid, so I really like the play of just trying to control the board with the Thalnos, try and draw into your Hex and your win conditions to get things done. And Zalay would really like to be able to just plop down this Malagos, but there's a very high chance he's dead if he plops down the Malagos, right? I guess only really Bloodlust is the only card that single-handedly kills him, but it's still super scary, so I think it's probably okay to take a pretty passive turn and just, play at least one of the Feral Rages and a Mire Keeper. That 8 life total is really scary, but your opponent doesn't have Hex, because if there was a Hex, this 8/8 would not be left standing there, so it's a really awkward position. But hopefully you're still ahead enough on board that you can then play the Malagos next turn. And he's deciding on 1 Feral Rage instead of 2, so he can squeeze in that hero power, remove his opponent's minion. And I agree with that. That's plenty of health. 14 against a mid-range Shaman. It's very interesting to see him trade 8 damage into a 1/1. But he's scared of Maelstrom Portal. He's scared of Storm. He knows there's no Hex in the opponent's hand, so what are the ways that your Arcane Giant dies? And it's like spell power, Storm stuff. Like, I think it's fine. You're not going to win by clocking them by 8 every turn. It's more of a late game plan at this point, I guess. He wants to continue trying to bait Hex. I think at this point your opponent doesn't have Hex, and I'm slamming the Malagos. But a little more patience from Zalay than I would have in this situation. Figures Azure Drake's good enough, and honestly, Azure Drake is pretty good in this situation to refuel your hand and keep going. So damage goes to the face now. Decent board develop. 17, 22 damage threatening for next turn. So Zalay has set up lethal. If Ragnaros comes down, the Shaman player is going to die. So he has to realize that. Not even a single swipe has been used, and both swipes are lethal in this situation. So he's really thinking about taunting up, but if he taunts up, it's kind of awkward. So yeah, he's got to taunt and storm. And if you're taunting and storming, then that means you're going to be overloaded next turn, so you can't play Rag or Thunderbluff. He's really backed into a corner here. He's just doing his best to try and stay alive. And if he can stay alive long enough, the mid-range Shaman player can actually outlast the Druid's hand, is what he's hoping for, I assume. So he's just like, survival, 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 and then the Druid will run out of cards and I can win. But the Druid's not running out of cards. That's another 8/8 and a 4/12, so Zalay's just got tons of fuel. And he's going to get that 8/8 out there. keep his giant healthy, right? Keep it at the 8/4, so that it can't get caught in the crossfire of some AoE spells, so that hexes are going to be required. And if 2 hexes are required for these giants, there's going to be no hex left over for the Malagos. So I like this line of play a lot. Azure Drake's a really solid top deck, but it's not solid enough. When you're looking at 16 damage down the barrel, it's a lot. And that's not a taunt totem. So the mid-range Shaman player is going to go down. Zalae was just able to do what Druid wants to do, which is ramp up in the early game, and then ramp up in the mid game, and then recover the board. And the mid-range Shaman player, to his credit, was able to be very aggressive at the early stages of the game, get through a lot of damage, and get Zalae almost down to dead, like really, really close to dead. But it just wasn't enough to finish the job, and I think one of the weirder turns there was maybe when that Fandral was on the board, there could have been some way he could have reacted less to it to have a higher % chance of winning. I know we could see Zalae's hand and he had a lot of Fandral combo cards, but I still think, you know, when you're the aggressor and you're playing the aggressive role, and then you run yourself into a situation where you have to overload yourself and be unable to play things like Fire Elemental and all those kind of cards because you overloaded yourself the turn before, then you're going to have to switch gears and stop being the aggressor. And I think that transition to being the defensive player in the game came a little bit either too late for the situation, because he was already pretty much all in on being the aggressor and then had to switch into being reactive and trying to be defensive too late. So I think if he read his hand a little bit better and maybe either committed to going all in all the way and didn't try and switch to be the reactive player, or switch to be the reactive player sooner, he would have had better chances of winning.